I'm Emma Lubitsch with CAN TV. We're here with Tanya Woods, Executive Director of Westside Justice Center. Thanks for being with us today. Can you just tell us a little bit about the work that you guys do?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. We at the Westside Justice Center, we are a holistic legal aid clinic committed to providing free or pro bono legal services to people who cannot otherwise afford it. But we do a little bit more than just provide direct services. We also provide and promote legal education and information, as well as advocacy work around issues of broad concern where we find them. So we really try to address the whole person and all of the needs that they may bring to the table through the lens of a legal and social justice eye.
So Chicago right now and the world are in the midst of a mass uprising, calling for an end to police brutality, an end for structural racism. And so what does that movement look like in Chicago specifically?
Well, what you're seeing now, and this is really a nod to people who have been doing this work long before me and have been engaged, but probably not getting the same platform or media attention until now, because we're seeing these types of uprisings, as you mentioned, all across the globe. But what we're really seeing is an opportunity for people who have been engaged, but they're now getting a voice, and where folks are coming together very organically in coalitions in ways that maybe they have not worked together before. So that's a real positive. And then folks who have previously not been engaged or felt like they didn't have a voice or that there wasn't someone really representing their concerns, they're starting to come to the table as well, which is even better. I always say it doesn't matter what time you show up as long as you show up to the party, right? So not to equate this with any fun that we're having at all whatsoever, but the fact that more and more people are able to find their voice is a good thing. And I think that's what's different, and that's what you see what's happening now. It's also a big education. There have been a lot of issues in the social justice space and the criminal justice reform space that have been talked about by maybe a select group of folks. But now those conversations are much more mainstream. You see a great deal more of education happening around, lots of terms that have only existed, in certain areas, that people are beginning to ask questions and want to know. And then what I think is most fantastic is people want to know how they can affect change where they are. And began to contribute in ways that maybe they have never thought about before.
And so how does the work that you guys do at Westside Justice Center, how is that kind of folding into what's going on right now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. For organizations like ours, as well as other community-based legal aid clinics, of which there are not that many, as you might think that they are, and that has to do with a long history of resources drying up in this space for many, many years. But through some brave legislation of late, our Governor Pritzker, and some key legislators downstate saw fit to dedicate monies in the amount of $10 million last year and another $10 million this year in a program called Illinois Access to Justice. And I bring that up because now you're seeing grassroots organizations get the resources that they need to be able to provide legal resources in the communities where their clients live and work. And the services are being provided by people who look like the clients that they serve. And that goes a long way in building trust and relationship between the community and the service providers. One that only seeks to strengthen the community and repower the community over time, and presents an opportunity for a sustainable and lasting model.
Right. Can you talk about, so we've seen a lot of mutual aid projects in Chicago, I think, and I think the protests have been getting the most coverage, but we've seen food distribution in neighborhoods that have had grocery store closures, and restaurants and community members coming together to provide meals for CPS students when CPS was not doing that. So can you just comment on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So this is a wonderful example of the community really coming together and taking care of itself. So, kind of pulling on the thread of the work that we're doing. This work of legal services, direct services, community education is work that we've always done and other grassroots organizations have always done. So I've been using the example like it's as if you've been preparing for the Olympics since you were 12 years old and all of a sudden somebody says, you get to go, right? So there's this moment in history right now where all of the work that we've been doing for generations and building on our work is now coming together where we can actually, activate ourselves in a much larger scale than maybe in the past when we've had smaller movements, right? So a larger movement of this scale requires the full force of the entire coalition to come to bear, right? So you see people stepping in and taking care of one another in ways that have never been highlighted before in the media that now are being highlighted. So you have folks like, the Let Us Breathe Collective talking about, we don't need more policing. People and communities can take care of each other, right? Our police should be there to serve and protect, not to fulfill the roles that they have recently been shown playing, right? But we can rely upon each other to make sure that we stay safe, that we peacefully protest, that we can make sure that our children have food. You may recall in the 60s history, the Black Panther Party was known for a lot of things that were portrayed as, evil and horrendous, but, through them being able to tell their story themselves, what we now know, many of us knew already, is they were the ones responsible for developing the blueprint for what we now call Head Start. And that was the free breakfast program, recognizing that if children go to school hungry, they're not going to learn. So let's all of us figure out a way to make sure that every child gets a meal so that they can go to school and learn. And so that's what you're seeing in these mutual aid, actions, where people know what to do to kind of mobilize and take care of one another if given an opportunity.
So Westside Justice Center was one of the organizations that was involved in the press release calling for, one, the release of all protesters that were being held in CPD custody, two, a moratorium on arrests and attacks from police on protesters, and then also just an overall defunding of the police in Chicago. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so at that time, and boy, has a lot happened since then, right? So that was a protest. George Floyd was unfortunately met his untimely death on May 25th. And that huge protest and demonstration by so many people was on a Saturday, the first Saturday in June. Following that, you had Mr. London along with many others that were incarcerated over that weekend. My son was one of those that was also incarcerated. So these were not, necessarily all career protesters and demonstrators. It was a movement where everyone wanted to really participate and raise their voice. And unfortunately, so many people who were peacefully protesting were detained and arrested, and in many instances denied counsel. And so what you saw was in that press release and that coming together was there were 5 demands. One was the release of Mr. London. The other was the firing of the officers who had brutalized him during that protest. And during that demonstration. But then the others that you mentioned were a call for defunding the police. Now, in the last 2 weeks, I think more people than ever have become familiar with that term, whereas 2 weeks ago, it was like, what does that mean? I even saw some memes where it was like, one of them went, somebody's calling the 911. It's just like, somebody's robbing my house. And the operator says, we don't have any more police. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. That's not what defunding the police means. If anything, there's a large continuum of theories on that scale that talk about what really is the role of policing. And policing should be about serving, protecting, not militarizing, not having communities living under siege and under fear, but really putting monies into the places that where we need it: mental health, housing, proper education, diversion programs, alternative dispute resolution, right? There are lots of other ways that a community can maintain stability, law, and order without the police, presence in the way that we've seen police presence here in Chicago. And not just now, this is decades long, right? So you see a lot of attention being paid to, the riots of '68. So we don't have to look very far back to see the relationship that the police have had with the Black community in Chicago. And there are multiple stories like this across the country. And so when you're talking about defunding police, what we're saying is there needs to be a systemic wide examination of where we're putting our dollars, not just in Chicago, but across the country. It is unconscionable that 10 times the amount of money is spent on policing that it is for the Center for Disease Controls, 12 times the amount for OSHA. Those numbers should not be present, right? We should be putting more of our effort into creating stable communities that are healthy, where people have access to healthcare, education, all the things that anybody would ever want. And then we can see a decrease in the need for the police and the roles that they've customarily played. And we see cities that are doing that now, right? So Minneapolis and other places have been in the news of late to say, yep, we tried this model. It actually does work. This is the new relationship that we're building with our communities. And we were wrong, right? And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
And I mean, I think, as you said, we've seen such measurable change across the country as a result of this movement. What does that look like? And is that possible in Chicago? Because as of now, I mean, we're the only major municipality in the country where defunding the police isn't even really on the table right now. So can you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're going to get there because there are enough voices now at multiple levels of government in Illinois that are beginning to speak out laudably and are starting to not see, oh, well, that's just happening in Chicago. I need to stay out of that conversation, right? So we're seeing leaders at all levels of all different backgrounds. So we're not just talking about Black elected officials, but as was demonstrated in our activity with the Resurrection Project, there are Latino communities standing up with Black communities. There are, white elected officials standing alongside Black elected officials. So everybody is kind of paying attention to this. I think there will definitely come a time when in the city that our, decision makers are going to have to take a critical look at what can be done instead of, only talking about what we can't do. And as more and more stories come out in the newspaper about bad acts and misconduct of the police, the more and more of the people are going to demand that the city take a crucial look at how we've been conducting business in better ways that we can indeed reestablish, or maybe in some instances, establish trust between those that are entrusted to serve and protect our communities and the people that they're supposed to serve. Yeah.
And what does the work for Westside Justice Center, like, what does that look like for you guys moving forward now?
So for us on a daily basis, as I mentioned before, this is the Olympics we've been training for. This is our model that we've always embraced, which is one, that we provide direct services in courts of law where possible for free, where other people may not have been able to access them. So that's what you typically would expect in a lawyer. The other part of our model also includes community navigators or community advocates. And those are people that may not have a JD, but they are trained in some way and equipped with skills to be able to advocate and assist people who are in need of system navigation, where they can co-author a blueprint for their own success around legal and quasi-legal issues. And then lastly is that component of education and information. And so COVID-19 and the pandemic that ensued put us into our homes, into virtual environments, whereas normally we would have gatherings in person that we can't any longer. It just means that we flipped the script and now we've gone back to making, telephone calls. We're using the virtual environment to put on workshops. We're using our YouTube channel to, host Know Your Rights workshops to inform and educate the general public. We are paying attention to the issues that we know that once the courts open up are going to need our attention. So housing issues, eviction issues. People have lost their jobs. People are in danger of being thrown out of their apartments or their mortgages coming due. So those are the things that we are anticipating and gearing up to try to assist folks with. In addition to that, we know that that what goes along with job loss, there are some people who have lost their jobs under the pretense of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll have discrimination or civil rights issues that will need to be pursued. And then the unanticipated, which was, the detention of so many people that were lawfully demonstrating, denied counsel, and treated poorly while in detention. All of those individuals are continuing to come through the door, and we will try to serve them along with our other agencies that are in this space. So this is how our work has changed and pivoted, but actually has remained the same and consistent, just being conducted in a different way. But we're also starting to speak up on some of the laws that are currently on the books that we definitely want to see change. So we talked a little bit about defunding the police, permitting more money to go into diversion programs and mental health programs and housing programs and alternative dispute resolution programs, starting to ask for system change, not merely addressing the symptoms, right? It's one thing to talk about, a slap on the wrist, fire an officer here or there, or training the police academy. But until we start to take a long, hard look at, our systemic issues, which are like the roots of a tree, and really begin to pull at those roots and dig them up, that's when we're going to see lasting change. And so you will see the Westside Justice Center at the forefront of those discussions.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tanya. I really appreciate having you on.
And thank you so very much. If you want more information about how you can reach out to the Westside Justice Center, your viewing audience can find us at westsidejustice.org. That's WESTSIDEJUSTICE.org. And we can be reached at 773-940-2213. You can also learn more about Illinois Access to Justice at that same website and phone number.